Maniac McGee by Jerry Spinelli. Before the story. They say Maniac McGee was born in a dump. They say his stomach was a cereal box and his heart, well, a sofa spring. They say he kept an 8-inch cockroach on a leash and that rats stood guard over him while he slept. They say if you knew he was coming and you sprinkled salt on the ground and he ran over it, within 2 or 3 blocks he would be as slow as everyone else. They say. What's true? What's myth? It's hard to know. Finsterwald's gone now, yet even today you'll never find a kid sitting on the steps where he once lived. The Little League field is still there, and the band shell. Cobble's Corner still stands at the corner of Hector and Birch, and if you ask the man behind the counter, he'll take the clump of string out of a drawer and let you see it. Grade school girls in 2 mills still jump rope and chant, "Maniac, maniac, he's so cool. Maniac, maniac, don't go to school. Runs all night, runs all right. Maniac, maniac, kissed a bull." And sometimes the girl holding one end of the rope is from the West End, and the girl on the other end is from the east side of Hector. And if you're looking for Maniac McGee's legacy or monument, that's as good as any, even if it really wasn't a bull. But that's okay, because the history of a kid is 1 part fact, 2 parts legend, and 3 parts snowball. And if you want to know what it was like back when Maniac McGee roamed these parts, well, you just run your hand under your movie seat, and you be very, very careful not to let the facts get mixed up with the truth. When the novel's over, I want you to go back and play this beginning part again, and it will all make sense. Part 1. Maniac McGee was not born in a dump. He was born in a house, a pretty ordinary house, right across the river from here in Bridgeport. And he had regular parents, a mother and a father. But not for long. One day his parents left him with a babysitter, and they took the P&W high-speed trolley into the city. That's a train. On the way back home, they were on board when the P&W trolley had its famous crash. When the motorman, that's the guy driving the train, he was drunk, and he took the high trestle. Those are train tracks over a bridge. He took the high trestle over the Schuylkill River at 60 miles an hour, and the whole caboodle took a swan dive into the water. And just like that, Maniac was an orphan. He was 3 years old. Of course, to be accurate, his name, it wasn't really Maniac then. He was Jeffrey Lionel McGee. Little Jeffrey was shipped off to his nearest relatives, Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan. They lived in Hollidaysburg in the western part of Pennsylvania. Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan, they hated each other. But because they were strict Catholics, that's a type of Christian, they wouldn't get a divorce because they were strict Catholics. And around the time Jeffrey arrived, they stopped talking to each other. And then they stopped sharing. And pretty soon there were 2 of everything in the house. 2 bathrooms, 2 TVs, 2 refrigerators, 2 toasters. And if it were possible, they would have had 2 Jeffreys. As it was, they split him up as best they could. For instance, he would eat dinner with Aunt Dot on Monday and with Uncle Dan on Tuesday, and so on and so on. 8 years of that. So he's 11 now. Then came the night of the spring musical at Jeffrey's school. He was in the chorus. And there was only 1 show. And there was only 1 auditorium. So Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan were forced to share at least that much. Aunt Dot sat on one side of the auditorium. Uncle Dan on the other. Jeffrey probably started screaming from the start of the song, which was, "Talk to the animals, walk with the animals." But nobody knew he was screaming because he was drowned out by all the other voices. And then the music ended and Jeffrey went right on screaming. Ah! His face was bright red by now. His neck was bulging. And the music director faced the singers, and he was frozen with his arms still raised. And in the audience, faces began to change. There was a quick smatter of giggling by some people who figured the screaming kid was some part of the show. Some funny animal, maybe. And then the giggling stopped and the eyes started to shift and heads started to turn. Because now everybody could see that this wasn't part of the show at all. That little Jeffrey McGee, he wasn't supposed to be up there on the risers, pointing to his aunt and his uncle, bellowing up from the middle of the chorus, "Talk! Talk, will you? Talk! Talk! Talk!" Nobody knew it then, but it was the birth scream of a legend. And that's when the running started. 3 springy steps down from the risers, girls in pastel dresses screaming, the music director lunging. A leap from the stage, out the side door and into the starry, sweet onion grass smelling night. Never again to return to the house of 2 toasters. Never again to return to school. Side note, so at age 11, he was a homeless runaway kid. And he dropped out of school at age 11. Chapter 2. Everybody knows that Maniac McGee, who was then Jeffrey, he started out in Hollidaysburg and he wound up in 2 Mills. The question is, what took him so long? And what did he do along the way? Sure, 200 miles is a long way, especially on foot. But that year that it took him to cover, it was about 51 weeks more than he needed. Meaning he could have done it in a week. That's why this period is known as the Lost Year. And another question, why did he stay here? Why the town of 2 Mills? Of course, there's the obvious answer that's sitting right across the Schuylkill, Bridgeport, where he was born. Yet, there are other theories and ideas. Some say he just got tired of running. Some say it was the butterscotch crimpets. And some say he only intended to pause here, but that he stayed because he was so happy to make a friend. If you listen to everybody who claims to have seen Jeffrey Maniac McGee that first day, there must have been 10,000 people in a parade of fire trucks waiting for him at the town limits. Side note, you know when something big happens and everybody claims, "Oh, I was there." Don't believe any of it. A couple of people do truly remember when he arrived, and here's what they saw. A dirty, scraggly little kid jogging towards them. The soles of both sneakers were hanging by their hinges and flopping open like a dog's tongue each time they came up from the pavement. Remember, he's homeless. But it was something else they heard that made him stick out in their minds all these years later. As he passed them, he said, "Hi." Just that, "Hi." And he was gone. And then they stopped. They blinked. They turned and they stared after him and they wondered, do I know that kid? Because people don't just say hi like that to strangers. Not here. Not just out of the blue. Chapter 3. As for the first person to actually stop and talk with Maniac, that would be Amanda Beale. And it happened because of a mistake. It was around 8 o'clock in the morning and Amanda was heading for grade school, like hundreds of other kids all over town. What made Amanda different was she was carrying a suitcase. And that's what caught Maniac's eye. He figured she was like him, running away. So he stopped and he said, "Hi." Amanda was suspicious. Who was this white, strange kid? And what was he doing in the East End, where almost all the kids were black? And why was he saying that? But Amanda Beale was also friendly, so she stopped and said, "Hi," right back. "Are you running away?" Jeffrey asked her. "Huh?" said Amanda. Jeffrey pointed at the suitcase. Amanda frowned and then thought, "Oh," and then laughed. She laughed so hard she began to lose her balance, so she set the suitcase down and sat on it so she could laugh more safely. When at last she could speak, she said, "I'm not running away, I'm going to school." She saw the puzzlement on his face, and she got off the suitcase and opened it up right there on the sidewalk. Jeffrey gasped. Books. Books, all right. Both sides of the suitcase crammed with them. Dozens more than anyone would ever need for homework. Jeffrey fell to his knees, and he and Amanda and the suitcase were like a rock in a stream. The schoolgoers just flowed to the left and to the right around them, like a rock in a stream. He turned his head this way and that way to read the titles. He lifted the books on top to see the ones beneath. There were fiction books and non-fiction books, who did it books, let's be friend books, what is it books, how to books, how not to books, and just regular old kid books. On the bottom was a single volume from an encyclopedia. It was the letter A encyclopedia. It's my library, Amanda Beale said proudly. Someone called out, "You gonna be late for school, girl?" Amanda looked up. The street was almost deserted. She slammed the suitcase shut and started hauling it along, and Jeffrey took the suitcase from her. "I'll carry it for you." Amanda's eyes shot wide. She hesitated, and then she snatched it back. "Who are you?" "Jeffrey McGee." "Where are you from, the West End?" "No." She stared at him. She stared at the flap-soled sneakers. Back in those days, the town was pretty much divided. The East End was black. The West End was white. "I know you're not from the East End," she said. "I'm from Bridgeport." "Bridgeport? Way over there, Bridgeport?" "Yep." "Well, why aren't you there?" "It's where I'm from. It's not where I am." "Great. So where do you live?" Jeffrey looked around. "I don't know. Maybe here." "Maybe?" Amanda shook her head and chuckled. "Maybe you better go ask your mother and father if you live here or not." She speeded up, and Jeffrey dropped back for a second and then caught up with her. "Why are you taking all these books to school?" Amanda told him. She told him about her little brother and sister at home, who loved to crayon every piece of paper they could find, whether or not it already had typing all over it, and about the dog Bow Wow, who chewed everything he could get his teeth on, and that, she said, was why she carried her whole library to and from school every day. The first bell was ringing, and the school was still a block away, and Amanda ran. Jeffrey ran. "Can I have a book?" he said. "They're mine." "I know, just to read, to borrow." "No." "Please, what's your name?" "Amanda." "Please, Amanda, anyone, your shortest one." "I'm late now, and I'm not going to stop and open up this thing again. Forget it." He stopped. "Amanda!" She kept running and then stopped, turned, and glared. What kind of kid was this anyway? All grungy, dirty, ripped shirt. Why didn't he go back to Bridgeport or to the West End, where he belonged? Bother some white girl over there. And why was he still standing here? Okay, so what if I loaned you one, huh? How am I going to get it back?" "I'll bring it back, honest. If it's the last thing I do, what's your address?" 728 Sycamore. "But you can't come there. You can't even be here." Second bell rang, and Amanda screamed and whirled and ran. "Amanda!" She stopped and turned. "Ugh!" she squawked. She tore a book from the suitcase and hurled it at him. "Here!" and dashed into the school. The book came flapping like a wounded duck, and it fell at Jeffrey's feet. It was a story of the Children's Crusade. Jeffrey picked it up, and Amanda Beale was late to school for the only time in her life. Side note, the Children's Crusade was an event in history where a large group of Christian children headed across Europe into the Middle East to try and convert people to Christianity. And sadly, most of them died. Doesn't sound like a great children's story, does it? Chapter 4. Jeffrey made 3 more appearances that first day in 2 mills. The first came at one of the high school fields. During 11th grade gym class, most of the students were playing soccer, but about a dozen were playing football because they were on the varsity, and the gym teacher happened to be the football coach and the star quarterback, Brian Dennehy. He wound up and he threw a 60-yarder to his favorite receiver, James Down. better known as James Hands Down. And he was streaking a fly pattern down the sideline, but the ball never quite reached Hands. Just as he was about to cradle that ball in his big, brown, loving mitts, it vanished. By the time he recovered from the shock, a little kid was weaving upfield through the varsity football players. Nobody laid a paw on him, and when that kid got down to the soccer field, he turned and he punted that ball. It sailed back over the up-looking gym classers, spiraling more perfectly than anything Brian Dennehy had ever thrown, and it landed in the outstretched hands of a still stunned James Hands Down. And then the kid ran off. There was one other thing, something that all of them saw, but nobody believed. Until they compared notes after school that day. Up until that punt, the kid had done everything with one hand. He had to, because in the other hand was a book. Hint, hint, who was it? And we'll read chapter 5 tomorrow.